Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hanging Out with Nolan Hogg. And joining us this week on the podcast is a person that I just recently met. And even in the few, minutes that we were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, you have the most fascinating life. I need you on the podcast. And amongst the many things that he has done in his life, he's currently the COO of Pacific Animal Initiatives and is the executive director of the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, which is the island's only animal welfare organization. He's been featured on all kinds of TV shows, and he's been in People magazine and Oprah's stuff. He's been all over the world sharing about what they're doing, which is really incredible over in Lanai. And I can't wait to talk about and also find out more about his life. But ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the podcast, Keoni Vaughn. Hey, Keoni.
Hey, Nolan. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. No, as I mentioned, just in the little bit that we got to talking, every little thing that you would say, oh, and we do this. Oh, and I've done that. It's oh my gosh, this is the most incredible life experiences that you've ever done. So let's start off with the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, which is what you're kind of most known for right now. Can you explain a little bit about what the program's mission is and what you guys are doing over there in Lanai?
Yeah, so first of all, I think I have one of the most unique, crazy jobs in Hawaii, if not, other places, and I get asked a lot. A lot of people identify that, I'm in animal welfare. I've been there for 20 years or so. But then they ask me, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, let me try to explain what I do. I'm the executive director for the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, and it's really a grassroots organization that's grown throughout the years. It's founded by a woman that moved from Illinois to Lanai and stumbled across an issue, quite frankly, of cats and birds. And so these cats, she basically was contacted by the conservationist group on the island at the time. This was back in 2004. The conservationists stumbled across these cats that were predating on these native and endangered birds. So she moved to the island, and she had a kitten that stumbled across her doorstep. And long story short, she realized quickly there wasn't a veterinarian living on Lanai, and that she had to actually drive down to the harbor, catch the ferry to Maui, rent a car, take the kitten to a local veterinarian in Lahaina. And that's when the veterinarian said, hey, I wish somebody would do something on Lanai about these cats. There's no animal control, there's no humane society, there's really nothing there. And cats, are reproducing at an alarming rate. So she started doing trap, neuter, and return, which is a humane strategy for animal population control. And then the conservationists found that the cats were predating on these birds, and these birds are really special birds. They lay one egg a year. They come back to the same ground nest every year, and so it wasn't a very safe environment for these cats. And a lot of people don't realize that these. The conservationist role is to protect the native and endangered species, and they do that by trapping these feral and fractious cats. These aren't household pets, right? These are cats that have been born in the wild and never seen a human into our intervention. Well, they were trapping the cats, and what they were going to do is lethally, shoot the cat, and because cats aren't adoptable, etc. And so this woman, Kathy Carroll, the founder, said, hey, can I have 30 days to remove these cats from this situation? And I'm trying to do it in a humane way. And they said, okay, we'll give you 30 days. And so she negotiated with the Four Seasons Koele at the time to loan her a horse corral, and basically she relocated 25 cats that she trapped in the 30 days to this horse corral and netted it in so the cats couldn't get out. Of course, she spayed and neutered them and whatnot. And she thought the job was done. Well, within a year, she had 100 cats that she had trapped and relocated to this corral. And so clearly, she started realizing that this is going to be a much bigger issue. And so, and that realization came on pretty quick. And so she, negotiated a deal down by the airport, outside of town, literally in the middle of nowhere, where we have 3.5 acres, and started building this cat sanctuary. So it really evolved from a really grassroots organization with the intent of trying to save cats and birds. And listen, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and cat people and bird people, by and large, don't get along for obvious reasons. and in my last job, when I worked at the Humane Society, I went to hours and hours of meetings on this topic. And so I was fortunate enough to start working there in January of 2014. And what really inspired me to take on this job, and quite frankly, leave a really big job at the Humane Society, to come work on a remote island in the middle of nowhere with 3,000 people, no electricity, no internet, just a 2-inch water line in the middle of nowhere, and at that time 350 cats, was that I felt that as a native Hawaiian and someone born and raised on Oahu and in Waimanalo, and the native birds came first, right? And we introduced the cats, and through pet irresponsibility, we let cats out and that are not spayed or neutered. And so if there was any place on the planet, let alone in the state, that we could potentially help protect both species, I figured it was Lanai. Kind of more of a controlled environment, smaller human population, etc. So I took on the task, and that's kind of where we're at.
You were mentioning the differences being so vast between cat and bird people, but seeing that you're kind of in the middle, like what have you seen as kind of been the bridging gap, or the thing where you go, hey, if I think this is how we get them to coexist, is there like a philosophy or a place where they can have a balance, like?
Yeah, it's kind of a controversial one, but hey, no problem is easy, right? If it was, it wouldn't be a problem, right? And so here's the philosophical difference, at least in my opinion, right? Some organizations say that they will not choose one species over another, right? Like most humane societies, their stance is we're not going to choose a species over another. My personal view is by not selecting or picking a species, you're indirectly picking one. So I think it's important to know that every community is different. We are not trying to say that we are the solution to the problem. I wish it was that simple, but it's working for us. And so I feel that if we can save both, or at least have an impact on both species, then why not give it a try, right? And I think that's what inspired me to the job from the get-go. I heard for so many years in these meetings at my last job, we can't do this, we can't do that, and people, I think human nature tend to, make excuses or find a way to say why they can't do something. And so I take a very different approach. It's like, why not? Why can't we try to do something, different? And so that's been my approach all along. And quite honestly, my colleagues are saying this is never going to be sustainable, it's never going to work, and that just fueled the fire within me. And one thing that I think I learned the most out of this is that I was brought up in this animal welfare shelter environment, and it was always ingrained in me, and once a feral cat, always a feral cat. And that's kind of the mindset I went into when I took on this lead, position at the cat sanctuary, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And it was pretty amazing to find that, 95% of these cats that we're bringing in are truly, truly wild. They're not community cats. They're not cats running in a neighborhood. These are cats that have never seen a human, right, until our intervention. Well, through the luxury of space and time at our sanctuary, about 40% of those cats become friendly and socialized, and then become adoptable. And that was kind of the biggest aha moment for me, at least.
Yeah. What are the differences between, like the behavioral differences, I guess, between a feral cat and an adoptable cat? Where is the gap between the two?
A huge gap, right? So you bring in a feral cat that's trapped in a humane trap, and this cat does not want to be around a human. It wants to be in its own little space. It's very, very aggressive. trying to defend itself and whatnot, and whereas a socialized cat or a adoptable cat is quite the opposite, right? Wanting to come up and jump in your lap and kind of be with you when they want to be with you, right? It's a cat. Cats do what they want when they want. So it's a polar opposite. And so for us, when we bring in these feral cats and to see 40% of them turn around and become completely adoptable and climbing all over people and wanting those cuddles, it's just a full circle and a really rewarding experience.
How do you guys what is the process and how they transform from these feral cats to adoptable? Is there anything you do specifically, or is it just by the nature of the environment that they find like, hey, humans are all right?
right. Total great question. We don't know. We do know. What we do know is that all the cats that we bring in, which is about 200 a year from Lanai, are welcome to us to stay with us for the rest of their life. There's like no pressure, right, to become friendly. And so we bring them in. They go through this rigorous process to make sure that they're all spayed or neutered, fully vaccinated, healthy before we release them out into these main population areas. And then, like I said, sometimes the cats just kind of go and hide and run away, and but they're safe. They're being fed. They're being cared for. They don't have to go and fend for themselves, kind of thing. But here's the funniest part. We believe that our visitors, which is about 16,000 visitors a year that come to us from all over the world just to hang out with cats, we believe that these people are the key to the socialization of these cats, right? So these people come, and we have a welcoming committee. It's probably about 100 cats that kind of, they could care less about the staff showing up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning for feeding and cleaning. But at about 9:45 every single morning, about 100 of these cats kind of congregate around the main gates where the tourists come in, and they just sit there and they're just waiting to be greeted by the people. And so obviously we give our guests little bags of treats and whatnot, and they can feed the cats. And so we have the friendly ones that are waiting for the treats. Well, we have all the hundreds of others that are peeking through the bushes or up in the trees. They're looking. And over time, like I said, about 40% of them are like, wow, that's not such a bad idea. Let me get closer and closer. And next thing you know, they're in the guest laps. And so
that's awesome.
that's all we got. And that's all we know. There's no manual on how to build a cat sanctuary and that kind of stuff. So that's what we really rely on our guests to do, is help socialize these cats.
That's really cool, because it goes back to when you brought up your earlier point of a lot of the times people are so resistant to trying because they come up with all the reasons why not to. And you guys are like, why not? And then you just do something so basic, and you don't even have necessarily an explanation of how it works, but the fact that you tried is what got it to work. It's like, let's just try it, and then look at the beautiful result that you got from it. I think that's so inspirational that we could apply to not just a cat sanctuary, but to life in general. Like, why not try to see if it can work? And some really beautiful results can come from it.
Yeah, I think that's really been my approach to everything that I've done for quite some time, and I got it from, I think, my grandfather. And my grandfather was always that guy that really told me, hey, you got to try, pal. You got to do something different. You don't have to be the status quo. If you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but you got to give it a shot. It may not work all the time, but what if it does? So that's kind of always ingrained in me. So everything that I do, I try to apply that. And let me tell you, when you're on the island of Lanai in the middle of nowhere, you are forced to think outside of the box. You have to do everything yourself, right? We don't have a plumber. We don't have, all the luxuries, literally, that people, I think, take for granted. Or you can pick up the phone if a pipe breaks, right? Yeah. No, my manager and I are literally YouTubing it and trying to figure out how to fix it. And that's just one of hundreds of examples that we've had to do over the last 9 years that I've been there.
Oh my goodness.
But it comes all from a good place, right? And it kind of just, morphs and grows as we mature in our organization.
What is one of the more memorable things that you've had to, problem solve for on the property? Is there anything
I have
that
a couple of
sticks
funny.
out in your mind?
Yeah, I had a couple of funny stories, and I had been at the Hawaiian Humane Society for over 10 years, and I started off as a stray animal pickup guy, and then became a humane investigator, then chief investigator, and then I left as the vice president of the organization. I really thought I was going to retire there, and so at the time, 71 staff, what was our budget? I think our budget was like $5 million, and I had an office with electricity and a computer and a chair. And so, and so then I took this leap, almost a leap of faith, right, to take on this task. And my first 72 hours of starting was probably one of the most memorable. I get there, and there were 3 staff. Right? And 350 cats.
Oh my gosh.
The budget was really small. No electricity. There was running water. There obviously no internet. But it was just, and we were in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
Yeah.
what did I just take on? And
Did
so
you visit this
said, okay.
before you accepted the job?
No, that was the funniest part.
What?
So, I had a couple visits. I had a couple visits just to kind of get, I was asked to provide input and help. But I didn't really give it that much thought, right? I mean, I did when I was there, but now giving up, my career at the Humane Society and then saying, all right, full steam ahead. It was a little bit of I don't know how to put it, but a little bit of a culture shock, right?
Yeah.
The difference. And so I'm like, okay, deep breaths. We can make this work. And so I asked the founder. This is a funny story. I asked I said, what are one of your couple biggest challenges? And one of them was, our cat food keeps getting, attacked by field mice, right? And getting into the storage container. And we're they're destroying the cat food. And so I looked, I said, where is it? And they showed, the Home Depot shed. Yeah. But it was on the outside of the cat sanctuary, right? And so I said, let's just move it inside.
Right.
With 350 cats, I trust me, there's not going to be a single mouse that's going to get that cat food, right? And she's like, what a great idea. I mean, it's perfectly harmless, right? When oftentimes when you're in it, you're not going to see the obvious, right?
Right.
The other thing was litter. So can you imagine cat litter for 350 cats?
That was going to be my next question.
Pretty expensive. It could be pretty expensive. Well, they came up with this brilliant idea so there's a lot of cooked pine trees on Lanai. And so what they would do is they would have volunteers or themselves go and rake all the pine needles that had fallen on the ground in town, bring them out to the cat sanctuary. They put them on the driveway, right? Mm-hmm. And then they would use their cars, and every time they would run over the pine needles would get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it was almost like they were, I guess, self-mulching the pine needles, and they would use the pine needles after they were crushed as litter, right? Oh, so it was free, smells decent, whatever, but it was a lot of cars and a lot of time crushing pine needles.
Yeah.
So that was one of their biggest problems. I picked up the phone, called Home Depot, got a mulcher, and that was we started doing that. So
I was wondering where this was going. I was like, how do you solve this problem? And then you say that, and I'm like, oh, what the heck's wrong with me? Why is my brain not working?
And that's when I realized, okay, I think I can make somewhat of an impact. This is actually going to be fun. I absolutely love to problem solve. And it was a great program with a good base. It just needed to expand and add some, animal welfare components to it. So that's a couple stories that come to mind.
So what for these feral cats? So when I think of, the cats using the kitty litter and stuff like that, I assume that's something that's for domesticated cats. But you're saying these feral cats just instinctually know to like, hey, there's this, area with pine mulched up pine needles so I'm going to do my business. Is that how it works?
Yeah, right. I mean, cats.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And so what we did was we created a whole bunch of them, right? Of course, we have one that's an example because, funny enough, that's one of our most popular questions. Like, where do these cats go? I think there's two. Right? There's two things when I'm trying to describe the cat sanctuary, and you hear 700 cats, right? Mm-hmm. There's two things that come to people's minds. That's a lot of cats. It must smell like 700 cats. Yeah. Right? And feel like 700 cats. The two compliments that we get the most, it doesn't feel like 700 cats when you're there, and it certainly doesn't smell like 700 cats. Our sanctuary takes its pride in being pretty pristine. And so what we've done is throughout the years, we've learned, okay, X amount, for X amount of cats, we need X amount of these litter boxes. And they're gigantic litter boxes, right? We're talking 10 feet long by 4 feet wide kind of thing, filled with pine needles. And of course we change out the pine needles and whatnot. We put them on the outskirts of the perimeter of the enclosures, and the cats, I would say 90 to 95% of the cats use those litter boxes. Of course there's 700 cats. There's there's going to be mistakes, but that's what our staff's there for, to pick up all the mistakes.
I would have thought that the cats, I don't know nearly enough about cats to have this opinion, but I would have thought like they're territorial and that it's like, I'm not going over there. Like, 700 other cats just were there. I'm going to go find another place. But that's interesting that they still, can find their own spot to do that.
Yeah, and cats are, pretty independent, like you're referring to. But I think if they have enough space, right, mm-hmm. and we try to, it's hard to explain, but we try to duplicate the experience that the landscape that the cats came from. So when you come to our sanctuary, it's almost looks like if you look beyond the fence, right, mm-hmm. and their enclosure, there's not much difference. We provided some housing and some heights and all that, but by and large, we intentionally keep it as the same landscape of where they came from, so that the transition is a lot smoother. And we're very cautious of not overcrowding our areas. We've expanded quite a bit, in the last 8-9 years. And so as long as we provide enough space and outlets for these cats, mm-hmm. they're doing pretty well.
So then the next question, aside from the litter, I'm assuming the next most common question is like, how do you guys handle all the fleas, right?
Where's some wood? We don't have a single flea at our sanctuary.
How is that possible?
Promise you.
This is crazy.
We are so... I think there's a couple reasons. I think when Kathy Carroll, the founder, chose the location, and it was in the middle of nowhere, back in 2009 is when we moved there. I think they're twofold, right? Back then it was negotiating with Castle Cook, the landowner, and whatnot. They probably didn't want a cat sanctuary with a potential of, 100 cats near town, right? Near the community. Yeah. So they said, well, if you want a piece of land, it's way down there kind of thing. And it was an illegal dump site. And it was just, but it ended up working out perfectly because, Lanai has so many different microclimates. And like if you go to town, right, it's wet most of the time. And so where we are, it's a much drier area. So the bacteria doesn't breed easily, etc. But with regards to the fleas, we have flea treatment that's every month with our cats, topical and ground treatment. But we're also very, very, very cautious with our welcoming period, which is our kind of our quarantine period on new cats coming in, right? Uh-huh. So it's anywhere from a 2 to 5 week period from the time the initial cat comes in to the time the cat is released. And that's because of that reason. Once we get fleas in there, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder to get rid of them. And
yeah.
So we're fortunate.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. That's really cool. Yeah. All the usual questions that pop to mind, you just easily, answered them all, and it's like, Okay, I see how it works.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, and like I said, we kind of just made it up on our own, right? Of course, we have animal welfare experience that we brought in, for certain things, but other things, it's trial and error.
Yeah. So I have to imagine that with 700 cats that you don't know each and like, do you name each and every cat that comes through, or is it just like, oh, hey, brown cat, hey, orange cat?
Nope. Every every single cat matters. And so every cat that's brought in gets a microchip, right? That's the size of a grain of rice. It's implanted in the back of the shoulder blades. It's given a 12-digit number, but that number is then associated to a name. So every cat has a name. Every cat has a plan, a medical record. We know when the cat came in, what vaccines it got, when it got the vaccines, if there are any medical issues. That's all. It's all important to us. Now, we treat the 700 cats as a herd health approach, right? As far as, medical wise, but right down to, we have to fly in a veterinarian almost weekly from Oahu, and along with the team, because there hasn't been a veterinarian living on island. And so, they go through anywhere between, I would say, 25 and 35 cats, depending on what the issues are. So, every cat has a name. Now, true confession.
Yeah.
I'm horrible with the cat names. I can't remember them all, but we have some of our staff can name up to, I would say, 200, 250 cats easily.
Wow.
Just by looking at, that's so and so.
Yeah.
So.
I gotta imagine that some of them just look exactly alike when you have that.
Most of them, they're all kind of right. Yeah. They're all kind of related, right?
Yeah,
They're like kissing cousins, right? So there's a lot of tabbies, at our sanctuary, but they all have their own little quirks, right? Whether behavioral or they have some kind of little markings. It's pretty amazing. And for the ones that we don't know, then we just scan them and look it up, right?
Yeah. So who comes up with the names? I gotta imagine that you're starting to run out of names to give out.
You would think, we recycle a name every now and then, but staff come up with the names. Sometimes we put it out on our social media, saying if people want to come out, but usually those ones are usually those we've already selected. That's where it gets a little hard, but so we can get. We have like Bruno, named after Bruno Mars. Yeah. He just got adopted, and he was famous for jumping on people's shoulders. Friendliest big cat ever. But the guests would come, and they would, be kneeling down, feeding cats or whatever. And then Bruno would come and just hop on someone's shoulder almost like a bird, right?
Yeah.
And just ride on the person's shoulder. Most people, thought it was funny. Other people freaked out. But it's always makes fun.
Hey, you're at a cat sanctuary. What do you expect?
Yeah.
You're gonna have
cats
a cat
do what they want.
Yeah,
they do what they want when they want, right?
How does that work as far as the adoption? Is it that people come specifically to look to adopt, or are they just visiting and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've made a connection. How do I adopt this cat?"
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the vast majority of people coming on their vacation are just coming to hang out and see what we're all about. Mm-hmm. And then there's others that come with an intent to adopt. And that's where we get a little conflicted. Of course, we want our cats to find homes, right? Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, so we adopt out about 100 cats a year on average, and 95% of those cats are adopted out of state. Right, so these are visitors that are coming, let's say from California. They fall in love with the cat, and they want to take the cat home. Well, coming from a shelter environment for so many years, right? Mm-hmm. I know that there are so many unwanted cats, in their own community, and so before we adopt out our cats to them, we talk to them and we say, hey, there's probably cats in your own community from your own shelter that need homes. Have you ever considered that or tried that? I mean, think about it. We're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, right, by doing that, because we want to adopt out, but still at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And so they say yes, and as long as they say, yes, we've looked, but honestly, we fell in love with Botox. It was one of our cats' names. We fell in love with Botox, and we have that connection. And through our experience, as long as that human-animal bond is created, that cat's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And that's all that really matters at the end of the day, right? And so we have that conversation with them. They can't take Botox home, right, back to the hotel. They're on vacation. And so it's quite the process to adopt out the cat. They select the cat. Yeah. There's no adoption fee whatsoever. We just ask that they cover all the expenses getting Botox to their home. And so we line it all up. We get the airfares. We get a quote together. And then we, provide it to the adopters. And if they agree, then what happens is our manager will take the cat. He'll take the cat down to the ferry, catch the ferry, rent a car, stay the night at a pet-friendly hotel in Maui, and then the next morning take the cat to the airlines. We'll do just about anything to find that our cat's a warm lap to live on.
Well, you got to imagine to agree to go through all of those, hoops and barriers, and it's probably costly to pay for the transfer and all that stuff like that these families really that should show that they really do want and have a heart to adopt this cat and want to give it a life with their family for the rest of its life, rather than
I think the average is around,
hey, it looks cute, let's just take it home,
Right. Yeah. So I think the average might be around $450, $500 to the West Coast, right?
Wow.
So if they're making that kind of investment, then we're pretty confident that it'll work out.
Yeah. I know you're mentioning that you're terrible with the cat names, but are there any names that kind of stand out to you, or personalities of cats where you're like, oh, this one always, stands out in my mind, or I have a soft spot in my heart for?
I unfortunately, Botox passed away, but that was one of the cats that really stood out when I first came to the cat sanctuary.
Yeah.
I was walking around, I was looking, and I saw this really majestic male cat, and he was just kind of sitting proud, and he has big old jowls, right? And I said, hey, what's that cat's name? They said, oh, that's Botox. Oh my gosh. I laughed for the longest time. And it was the sweetest cat ever, but he had these really big jowls. There's so many. We had another cat that's, he was pretty famous. He has also moved on, but his name was Old Guy. And he was brought in from the gas station. And in town, the one gas station we have.
I was going to say, you guys have a gas station there?
One. And so he was brought in, pretty feral, fractious cat. Was super grouchy. Didn't want anything to do with any human. But he had a lot of cancer going on. And it was cancer in the ears and the nose and whatnot. And so we made the significant investment to, have him undergo quite a few surgeries. I think 3 surgeries as well. And by the end of the second surgery, the cat came around and was the friendliest cat ever. And so we're like, wow, this cat really wasn't feral. It's just in discomfort and pain, right? And so the cat ended up living quite a long time. I think he passed away at like 16 or 17 years old. And he just became a huge hit at our sanctuary. He wasn't the prettiest looking cat, but it didn't matter. He was really, really friendly. So that was really rewarding.
It would have been funny if you told me, like, oh, his name is Old Guy and he was like 2 years old. Got an old soul, apparently. So with 700 cats, and Lanai, understandably a very small place, like, have you guys achieved the goal of, like, have you hit this limit? Because what happens, I imagine, is that when you spay and neuter, this is as you mentioned, the population control. Has it hit the point where your original goal has been met as far as everything is under control on Lanai, or are there more, phases to go through in this mission?
Yeah, I think it's kind of cliche to say, but it's a reality. Our goal is to work myself out of a job, right? And so we really want to try to bring in more cats than we did the previous year, while maintaining the quality of care. And so, I have in my previous employment, I investigated animal hoarding, cat hoarding, situations where, rescue groups, they have they're well intended, but maybe they grow too fast or they don't have the resources to properly care for as many cats as they have under their care. And one thing that we're very cautious of doing is taking in more than we can properly care for, right? So, but at the same time, it's a balancing act. We try to bring in more cats than we did the previous year because we know cats can reproduce, unsterilized cats can reproduce at a very, very alarming rate. They can have 2 to 3 litters per year. Once they reach the age of 6 months old, they can have 2 to 3 litters per year.
Oh my gosh. And
within those litters, they can have 2 to 3 kittens per litter. So every 6 months, there's more litters, right? And so, it's an uphill battle, but it's still one that we are trying to do. Now, when I first started, we concentrated our efforts in town. And so there was a area where it was called the community gardens, and it's just an area, piece of land where people would have their own community gardens, but there was somebody feeding there, and there was more people feeding there, but the cats weren't getting sterilized, right? Because again, no veterinarian on island, etc. And so we focused our attention on that, and we brought in about 350 cats alone from that location.
Wow.
Over a period of 2 years, I think it was. And so now when you go to Lanai, you'll rarely see a cat in town, running around. And that was important for us. And now, so we're working closely with the conservationists. They focus their trapping in targeted areas where these native and endangered birds are ground nesting and bringing them to us.
Has there ever been thought, it just sounds like it makes so much sense, and just seeing the effectiveness that, the cat sanctuary has had on Lanai, has there been thoughts or requests for other islands to say, hey, can you guys create a cat sanctuary here on Maui or on Big Island or on Oahu? Has there been thoughts to expanding in that sense?
Yeah, so believe it or not, I get requests in my emails almost every other day. Wow. Not just on Oahu or neighbor islands, but also throughout the country. I've even had requests to help build a sanctuary in Afghanistan. I'm like, what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. For outside of the United States, and so here's a short story. I think the answer is yes. People want to. I think there's a need. I think there should be, in my opinion, a cat sanctuary in every community, at least one, especially in the larger communities. But it's a tricky balance. I wrote a blog on building cat sanctuaries. And, let's face it, even though Lanai Cat Sanctuary has 700 cats, we may be deemed as successful, what have you. It was a work in progress, right? This started, the sanctuary at our location was in 2009, not 2021, right? It's been a long work in progress. And so what I've told everybody that I've spoken to is start small. Kathy Carroll started with 25 cats. She didn't start with 500 or 700. And I think that's hard for most animal rescues and people to accept, right? They want to solve the problem. They want to bring in and save every cat. And you just can't, right? You have to live within your means, start small, learn from your mistakes, and then grow as you get better at things. And so, we're very, very, very cautious of it. And I think our environment, like I said, on Lanai, only having 3,000 people on it, the demand from the public wouldn't be as strong as the demand, let's say, on Oahu, right?
Yeah.
We are an open admissions sanctuary, meaning we will not turn any cat away from Lanai for any reason. And so I think all other sanctuaries that may be built on neighbor islands, for example, would have to have a criteria that's identified. Otherwise, the minute they build it, they're full and overflowing.
Oh, yeah.
So, They have to have a focus, right?
Yeah. I was curious. I mean, I know that you guys are very resourceful and are working with what you have and things, but it still sounds like a huge undertaking financially. How do you support yourself? Is it just based off of the support of donations of community? Like, how does it work for you guys?
Yeah, so we have to raise we have to raise almost $1 million a year now to operate, for 700 cats, and 95% of those donations come out of state, right? So we rely heavily on tourism. So if you think about this, it's a pretty unique model, right?
Yeah.
So let's take humane societies, right? Every humane society in the state is operating individually, right? They don't report to anybody. They're their own organization. And let's take Hawaiian Humane on Oahu. That is supported by their community, right? The island of Oahu and all the people, and county contracts for their animal care and control contract. On Lanai, there's 3,000 people. Right? So for 3,000 people to support $1 million organization a year, you got to have some really hefty cat lovers to be able to do that. So our model is a little different. We're an animal rescue group that relies on tourism first. So
that's so interesting.
That's our strategy.
Yeah. And how do the tourists know about it? Do you guys have like a pretty solid I guess communications or maybe a relationship with the Lanai tourism industry where they help?
Oh no, you're looking at him.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So
man.
we so what I did was back in 2014 when I started, I took a step back. We looked at the operations. We made sure that all the cats were taken care of. The staff were taken care of, the operational components. Yeah. And then we looked at, well, how are we going to fund this, right? Because like I alluded to earlier, there's 3,000 people on the island. It's really tourism that's going to help support this. And then I thought to myself, well, how many visitors come to Hawaii or anywhere and seek out their local animal shelter to go visit on their vacation? And how many of those are actually going to take, let's say if the average length of stay for a visitor is 5 days, how many are going to dedicate one full day out of their 5 days to either come by plane and spend that $150, $200 per person round trip ticket, or they're going to come on the ferry and take that trek to the cat sanctuary and dedicate their entire day? Wow, that's rough.
Yeah.
Right? To come to a cat shelter.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do is try to flip the model a little bit and make it a super fun, quirky place to visit. And then once you're here at our sanctuary, then we'll talk to you about our mission and our goals and educate you. But we want to make it a fun, quirky place. And so we rebranded. Before the sanctuary was called the Lanai Animal Rescue Center. And the intent was to kind of be that humane society of all animals. Yeah. But the reality is we only had cats. So then I shifted and rebranded and called it the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, and then we created this tagline, saving cats and protecting birds. And that I think really kind of wait, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we did. And so we turned it into more of a tourist attraction first, and it seems to be working.
So are there other, I guess, activities or things that guests experience at the cat sanctuary other than just hanging out with the cats? Or like is there a meal program or something, or like
no.
a little hula
We're very
show or
limited. Yeah, we're very limited. So we have 12 staff. We have myself, executive director, then we have a manager, and then we have our our veterinary assistants, and then we have our caregivers that feed, clean, and take care of the grounds. But that's it. So we're really a small organization that does quite a lot.
Yeah.
So people just come if they want to volunteer. Of course, we'll put them to work and do landscaping. But really, honestly, what the best help is socializing with these cats, right? Because our staff are so busy. Anyone that's willing to come and use a brush and brush a cat or pet a cat really goes a long ways for us.
And that's like the most fun part about hanging out with the cat. So for the guests, it's like, sure, yeah, give me that brush.
Right?
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that like, you pretty much your whole life has been involved in animal support and rescue. Where did this passion and love for animals come from? Is it something that you grew up from, or is it something that your grandfather inspired in you? Like, where did it come from?
I think a little bit of both. So I grew up in Waimanalo. Mm-hmm. And so born and raised in Waimanalo, and my grandparents had stables in the back roads. And so I was exposed to horses and peacocks and you name it. And as I got older, somehow my parents got me into showing dogs, like professionally. And so I showed dogs from when I was 7 years old to about 19 years old.
Wow.
And it started off here on Oahu. And I showed Great Pyrenees at first and Newfoundlands, there's really big dogs. And then I guess I was okay at it. And next thing you know, people wanted to hire me, even though I was a kid, to show their dogs. And so I ran the whole gamut from like Chihuahuas on up. And so and I always get that in the back of my brain telling me, remember the movie Best in Show? It's totally like that, right?
Really?
Oh my gosh, it's totally like that. And so, but I was a kid, right? So I was just kind of going along with it and whatnot. And so I did that. And then I did some national circuits in Washington State, and then Florida, and then New Jersey. And so that's how it kind of all started. And always had an affinity for animals. And then I lived on the mainland. I lived in Florida for a little bit, and then Wisconsin. And then I moved back to Hawaii in 1993. And by then I was 21 years old, and I had I stopped doing the whole dog show thing, and I got into the travel industry. I worked for the Waikiki Trolley. And I was a trolley driver. Yeah, I worked there for 12 and a half years.
Holy smokes.
And then then I needed a career switch, from the tourist industry after 12 and a half years. And so then I applied at the Hawaiian Humane Society. And like I said, I got hired as their stray animal pickup guy. It was a borderline dog catcher title at that time, right? Right. And so that's when my eyes really, really opened up. It went from, the polar opposite of showing, the best of the breeds, the various breeds of these dogs, right? Going to an animal welfare scene where these dogs and these animals were neglected. So that was like another big switch for me.
Wow. What was there a specific reason why you sought out to apply at the Humane Society? Like, did you go specifically looking for a job at the Humane Society, or did the job opportunity pop up that caught your eye?
I was looking for a career change, and my aunt at the time was the adoptions manager. And so she said, hey, you've always been good around animals. Why don't you apply to go do this? And I'm like, I was the assistant director of operations for the trolley at the time, and so going from that to a stray animal pickup guy was a huge shift. And so I said, oh, okay, let me think about it. And I thought about it, and actually applied there twice and didn't get hired. The third time I finally got hired. And that kind of goes back to the whole thing when people say you can't do something, right? It just kind of inspires me to do more. And so I didn't give up, and they finally decided to hire me. And that's where my career started in animal welfare. And then I really, really enjoyed the investigative components. Took some classes, became the state's first nationally certified animal cruelty investigator. Did puppy mills. I don't know if you remember the Waimanalo puppy mill case. That was my case. It was a very long case. About 3.5 years, really big case. But that's when I noticed we were making an impact for the better of animals. But I also dealt with major cat issues on Oahu, like from the Hawaii Kai Park and Ride, right? Where there was across from the Costco and all those cats and all the controversy that came from that. And so that's, I thought cats are getting a really bad rep out of this whole situation. It's not their fault,
Yeah.
We were bringing in at the time, I think about 19,000 cats a year to the Humane Society.
Wow.
19,000, Nolan. And out of the 19,000, I would say 90, if not 95% of those cats were feral cats, right? And it's not the cat's fault. And so that's kind of what led me to kind of make another career shift and go work on Lanai to try to make a positive impact for cats.
Yeah. You said that, you really enjoyed the when you got into the investigation part of your career. What kind of things were really inspiring to you? Like what elements of this job were so interesting to you?
I think the problem solving, I feel, another cliche statement, animals can't speak for themselves, right? So we have to be their voice. I don't know a better way of saying it because it's so true. These are helpless animals and put in unfortunate situations. And, I went with my investigations, there was a time to show, enforcement. But most times, Nolan, I really felt that the owners were not educated, right? They didn't realize that tying up a dog to a fence or to a tree for long periods of time, is really not the best for the dog. It makes the dog a lot more aggressive, which then can, break off the chain and, go chase after a kid and bite a kid kind of thing. And they were, using their dog as a security guard instead of a part of a family.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is I use those kind of scenarios rather than coming down hard on them and giving them a ticket or trying to take their animal away. It's really trying to work with them and educate them and then go check up on them every now and then to see if things are progressing. If it didn't, then we took the necessary steps. Yeah. Well, 9 times out of 10, they just needed some kind of help.
That makes total sense. And then I there's so many times where you just hear about like, well, this is the way, my parents did it. And so like they don't know any better. This is just how they were raised to believe that it's the natural way to care or treat an animal or a pet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that I did was I helped enhance our state animal cruelty law and even some of our ordinances here on Oahu. And so for me, that was making a bigger impact down the road, right? And then also educating the children, right? Because the children see a lot more than the adults do, right? They're playing in the neighborhood and whatnot. And so if we could teach them the proper ways to care for an animal, or if they see something, say something kind of thing, it really started making strides in the animal welfare movement, if you will.
Yeah.
And it also started changing, quite honestly, the court's perceptions on animal cruelty. Before, you would get a slap on the wrist if you did something pretty horrific to a pet. Now it's the tide has shifted in the right direction. So.
Yeah. That makes me feel like, there could be some really cool like programs in the schools, and so you inject this education into the students early, and then it kind of can change the whole perspective, moving forward for a community, because now these children have the proper background and information.
Yeah, and I'm not saying give up on the adults, but if you start with the kids, then maybe you're a little bit ahead of the game later on. Right?
I'll say it. Let's forget about the adults.
Sometimes I want to. But
you mentioned that you were driving, or you were at the Waikiki Trolley. I'm wondering if we overlapped a bit, because in probably like 2002-ish, for a couple of years, I used to work in Waikiki selling tours for Outrigger Activity Center.
Oh,
and
no kidding.
I used to have to call and set up, pickups and reservations and ticket sales for the Waikiki Trolley. So I was wondering if you were still involved at Waikiki Trolley around that time, like 2002.
Yep, I wasn't on the road. I started off as a driver, and then let's see, I did quite a few positions over there. Started off as a driver, learned how to drive the trolley, and then I taught new hires how to get their commercial driver's license for a little bit, and then I ended up being in the administrative office and whatnot. But back then, I was not on the road other than going and checking up on drivers and whatnot. But
so maybe
that was a pretty cool job. Who knows? But it was a pretty cool job to have. It's a great company, and when I was with them from 1992 or 93, and so back in the kind of the early days of the trolley, and now they're everywhere, right? Double deckers, the whole nine yards.
I in my experiences, I mean, not only did I work at the hotel, travel desk, but our family had restaurants and businesses in Waikiki. So I pretty much grew up in Waikiki. So I know that Waikiki is a very unique place with a lot of special individuals and all kinds of crazy things happen. Do you have any kind of like memory of something that still sticks with you today of, working at, whether it was driving the trolley or dealing with, situations with tourists and stuff that stand out to you?
Not necessarily a specific story or an experience, but what I will say is, I was very, very, very grateful for working with the Inoa tours and the Waikiki trolley for so long, because what it ended up doing without me even realizing is I applied all those experiences with tourism, with how Inoa marketed themselves. And I was giving tours to these tourists right over the microphone on the trolley and, around. And so what that ended up doing, I think, is when I ended up at the Lanai Cat Sanctuary and needed to rebrand or find a way to fund this sanctuary a lot more than what it was, the first thing that came to my mind was tourism. The second thing that came to my mind was, how do I apply everything that I learned at Inoa Tours and the Waikiki trolley? Because that's kind of a fun experience, right, for tourists. How can I apply this to the cat sanctuary? So I really feel that it really came full circle.
Yeah, it's so neat how like you have, if you look at it on paper, like your history of experiences are so different or unique, but then they all, when you see it at where you're at now, it's like, oh, it all lines up and it all makes sense. It's so
I don't know how, but
yeah.
My wife says, well, you're Gemini, so you always get bored and move on to the next thing and the next thing. And so, but I think I don't move on. I think everything just kind of starts growing together.
Yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about your grandfather giving you that advice and such, and I had a really, really close, tight-knit relationship with my grandfather growing up. What was your relationship with your grandfather like, and what did he do, and what were you guys close?
Oh my gosh, gives me chicken skin. He recently passed away, and
I'm so sorry.
he was 93. He had a long life.
Wow.
He's Hawaiian, Chinese, and Norwegian, and grew up in Kaimaki. And
what a mix!
Can't you tell? No.
I can't tell anything. I am so confused by you.
So he grew up in Kaimaki, and he went to St. Louis. He was the quarterback for St. Louis back then. And he got kicked out to St. Louis for fighting, and ended up going to Roosevelt. I was a quarterback over there, but he had fell in love with his high school sweetheart who was on the cheerleading squad for Sacred Hearts, and that was my grandmother. And so, classic story, right? They stay together forever. And so we, like I said, I was born and raised in Waimanalo in the beach lot area, and so he had a house and in the beach lot, and his house was one of the very first houses in the beach lots area, and he also had a house right next door, and that was actually his mother's. They bought the house around the same time, so they had side by side houses. That's the house I grew up in, and so my mom and dad were in the travel industry, and so they worked nonstop.
Yeah,
and so my grandparents were there for quite a bit of part of my life, and so my grandfather he didn't finish high school, and he joined. He volunteered for the draft during World War II, and it's pretty interesting. And he ended up I don't know, doing some kind of internal affairs position, and he was in the Army for a while, just for a short time, maybe I want to say like 4 years maybe, okay. And then he came out, and then he started just getting his hands involved in a lot of stuff. So he did the marketing and promotions for Pepsi Cola.
Wow.
And he convinced Disney to bring in an elephant that they had. And horrible now, right? I'm into animal welfare. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear these things. But he brought in an elephant from California to Hawaii and used, I don't know, it was almost like the Charlie Chocolate Factory story where they had like tickets in the 12 packs of the Pepsi Cola, so you can ride the elephant, this whole 9 yards. And then he did cigarette vending machines.
I remember those.
He was doing that. And then he got involved with a restaurant called John Dominis.
Ooh.
And that's when he was part owner along with my uncle.
Really?
Yeah, part owner along with my uncle, with Andy Anderson, and they built John Dominis. And that's when I was probably, I think it was built in, John Dominis I think was built in 72, which is the year I was born. But probably by the time I was 5 or 6 years old is when I was starting to spend all my summers with my grandfather. And so he was also partly responsible for the whole Section 8 housing program. Yeah. And so I just remember getting up super early in the morning and riding with him all day, going to all these housing inspections to make sure that the people that were offering Section 8 to the community were providing quality apartments essentially and places to live. And if they weren't, and they were, he'd use this term, but if they were, not taking care of it and they were treating them like slumlords, he would tell them, hey, no, these people, you owe these people a safe place to live. And so that kind of ingrained in me. He tried to get me to want to, as the years go by, to want to try to work there and work for the county and all that. I was like, no, I'm not interested, Papa. So, and then afterwards, at about, I would say 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, his day was done because he started so early, he would go and check in at John Dominis. And I would go with him, right? And the restaurant's, full steam. They're not open for lunch, but they're getting ready for dinner. Got to know everybody there. But then I started getting bored. And I thought it was a pretty funny story. But so I'm constantly going with him. And, it was cool at first. But after a while, I was like, oh, we got to go to the restaurant again.
It's work now.
Oh, it's work. And I'm a kid. I'm bored. And so he's like, oh, okay, pal. Well, this time you're gonna have fun. And have you ever been to John Dominis?
No, I just saw the pictures.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't afford to go there.
So maybe your listeners have been to John Dominis, but inside the restaurant is this little area where it was filled with fish and lobsters and all that, right? Well, my grandfather bought me a snorkel and a mask. And this is lunchtime, restaurants closed and whatnot. But I guess I was just nagging him, right? Like, I'm bored. Yeah. He gave me the snorkel and mask. He said, hey, go swimming. So I went swimming in the little pond area. And it was a little terrifying because these Hawaiian slipper lobsters on each side, right? Gosh. And little stingrays and all that. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And then I got bored of that. And then the windows open up at the restaurant. So another day, my grandfather brought a fishing pole, and I was fishing off the table, not even off the rocks, off the table, right? Casting it out. I was horrible at it, and I got bored because I was a young kid with a zero attention span. And so he's like, just go fishing in the pond already. Just leave me alone. I gotta work. So I'm fishing in the pond. Of course, I'm catching it. Oh my
so
there is an end to this.
So
I throw back, but there is an end to the story. There is an end to the story. So I was going to Holy Trinity School in the Neo Valley area, and I can't remember what grade it was in, but when I came back to school after the summer, we had to write what was one of the most fun things you did over the summer. I wrote this entire story, what I just told you, okay? Yeah. The teacher sent me to the principal's office because she insisted I was lying and fabricating this whole story. And I was crying. I'm like, and it was a sister, it was a nun. I was like, no, sister, I'm not lying. I promise I did it. I promise. No, you go to the principal's office. And so I went to the principal's office, still crying. I'm like, call my grandfather. He will tell you it's true. My grandfather came down to the school and talked to and said, my grandson doesn't lie, it's true. And they're like, what? So that was kind of a memorable story from with my grandfather. But he's always been that resilient guy that's, like I said, didn't graduate from high school, but still, became relatively successful in his own manner, but very, he never gave up, and he's always trying something different and always trying to, look out for his family and take care. And I think that's really, really ingrained with me. So later on in life, we became really close, and I ended up living next door to him later on in my late 20s. And, my mom had passed away. My grandfather at 93 outlived his wife and his two daughters in a matter of 5 years.
Wow.
And so my grandfather, I was fortunate enough and lucky enough to take care of him towards the end. And we've always been super, super close. So anytime that I have to make some really tough decisions, I always think, what would Papa do?
Yeah. So. Oh, man, that's so neat. I can totally see, like, through his life experiences, how he lived out that, his life advice that he gave to you about always try and try to figure something out, because it seems like he just didn't go through like the normal, like, this is what you do, A, B, C, D. He found his own path and took his experiences to take him to the next thing, and to see how successful he was. That's so inspirational. It's so impressive.
Yeah. He was really strict, and he softened up toward as we all do, I think, when we get older. But I am really trying my best to mimic that philosophy, with my own son. Yeah. And so, hopefully it all works out.
Hey, what happened with that teacher that accused you of lying when they...
she said sorry, and I'm like, okay. I was a young kid, but I was like, yeah, I told you. But no, she said sorry, and it was fine. And she actually made an announcement in the class and all. Oh, good. Because it was a pretty big scene. But, it was pretty funny.
I was almost expecting her to just like brush it under the rug, like sometimes the teachers, they don't want to show weakness, right? It's like, okay, I guess you're right. Okay, moving on, class. It's like, now the kids think I'm a liar.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Keoni, I know, like, I barely even scratched the surface with your life story, but this has been so awesome. I actually would look forward to having maybe a second episode, or even just us hanging out. And I feel like I haven't even heard about the other parts of your life, which every part has been so fascinating and entertaining. But I really appreciate you just not only taking the time to explain what you're doing now, but also just, I think, your whole life story and experiences and the people in your life that have led you to up to this point are so incredible and so inspirational. So the fact that you opened up that part of yourself and your story to us is something I really, really appreciate. I'm so grateful for.
It's fun, and thanks for having me on. I really try to, and my wife has really, we've been married for 10 years now, and she's really instilled in me to take this positive approach in just about everything we do. Yeah. And so, I owe a lot to her, for that. But I think life's too short, right, to be negative and say we can't do things. So why not give it a try? If it doesn't work out, fine, just tweak it a little until it does.
Yeah. See, this is why I think we get along so well, is like your philosophy and the way you approach life is the way that I want to think that way too. And I agree with you. Like, there's just so much negativity and it doesn't serve us. So why not try to approach it with positivity? And I just feel that your energy is so infectious. And so just being around you in these situations is inspirational to me too, where I'm like, yeah, let's go ahead and face the world with a smile and
Why not, right?
Decision to try to figure it out. Like I think it's fantastic. You're a really awesome person, and I'm so glad that we got connected and that we got to meet you.
Oh, thanks, Nolan. And I look forward to reconnecting with you and hearing your stories, because you're a really funny guy, and I want to hear those stories.
Well, before I let you get going, let's share with the listeners how they can, get to learn more about the Lanai Cat Sanctuary and any other things that you have involved that could, use attention or support.
Yeah, sure. So if you love the work that we're doing, or even just interested in it, you can learn a little bit more on our website, lanaiCatSanctuary.org. You can also follow us on our social media, primarily Instagram and Facebook. We just did live yoga with 700 cats the other weekend. Yeah, we streamed it. We have internet, so we streamed it, and it looks like we're going to try to do it on a monthly basis.
That's so cool.
And so so if you can't be there, then you can do the yoga with us. And oh man, there are a few hundred people tuned in. It was kind of fun.
What does that look like? What does cat yoga look like?
It's just a bunch of we had, I think, about maybe 25 or 30 people from the community. We even had some visitors that happened to be there that wanted to join in, and we had this yoga instructor who lives on island, and they were just practicing yoga, and our staff were trying to get a bunch of cats around the people, so we were putting treats around everybody, and the cats are just, they could care less. They weren't freaked out or anything. They were just climbing on people. And if you're a cat lover, I guess it's a cat lover's paradise, right? But I don't know. I don't do yoga. That's the only thing. I was like, oh no, this guy does not do yoga. But we will definitely work on it on the back end. But so we're going to be doing that.
You got to try it. Do it for me.
Maybe, but not on camera.
No, I was going to say, that's what would incentivize me to jump on the live stream just to see that.
Nolan, if I did that, our viewership would just plummet. I can't do that. So no, but there's different ways to read about us and support us. Mm-hmm. Also, if you have any questions, I'm always here, and happy to provide my email address, or you can reach us via the website. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, we'll put the link in the show notes and the description as well. So awesome. For those who don't know how to spell it, we'll have it written out for you and easy. But Keoni, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, and thanks so much for sharing all of this amazing stuff that has been your life. And I'm so excited to see what else is in store for the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Nolan.